everyone, and welcome back to the Reading Corner. I'm your host, Renee, and I am here for you every Wednesday, reading stories from the public domain. We are currently reading Sweeny Todd and the String of Pearls by James Malcolm Rymer, and we're almost through. So, if you like my channel, please remember to like it and subscribe to it. Share me with all your friends, get me out there. But without further ado, let's get into today's episode. Chapter 26. Colonel Geoffrey makes another effort to come at Sweeny Todd's secret. If we were to say that Colonel Geoffrey was satisfied with the state of affairs as regarded the disappearance of his friend Thornhill, or that he had made up his mind now contentedly to wait until chance or the mere progress of time blew something of a more defined nature in his way, we should be doing that gentleman a very great injustice indeed. On the contrary, he was one of those chivalrous persons who, when they do commence anything, take the most ample means to bring it to a conclusion, and are not satisfied that they have made one great effort, which, having failed, is sufficient to satisfy them. Far from this, he was a man who, when he commenced any enterprise, looked forward to but one circumstance that could possibly end it, and that was its full and complete accomplishment in every respect. So that in this affair of Mr. Thornhill, he certainly did not intend by any means to abandon it. But he was not precipitate. His habits of military discipline and the long life he had led in camps, where anything in the shape of hurry and confusion is much reprobated, made him pause before he decided upon any particular course of action. And this pause was not one contingent upon a belief, or even a surmise, in the danger of the course that suggested itself, for such a consideration had no effect whatever upon him, and if some other mode had suddenly suggested itself, which, while it placed his life in the most imminent peril, would have seemed more likely to accomplish his object, it would have been at once most gladly welcomed. And now, therefore, he set about thinking deeply over what could possibly be done further in a matter that as yet appeared to be involved in the most profound of possible mysteries. That the barber's boy, who had been addressed by him and by his friend the captain, knew something of an extraordinary character, which fear prevented him from disclosing, he had no doubt, and, as the colonel remarked, "If fear keeps that lad silent upon the subject, fear may make him speak, and I do not see why we should not endeavour to make ourselves a match for Sweeny Todd in such a matter." "What do you propose, then?" said the captain. "I should say that the best plan would be to watch the barber shop, and take possession of the boy, as we may chance to find an opportunity of so doing." "Carry him off?" "Yes, certainly, and as in all likelihood his fear of the barber is but a visionary affair, after all, it can easily, when we have him to ourselves, be dispelled. And then, when he finds that we can and will protect him, we shall hear all he has to say." After some further conversation, the plan was resolved upon, and the captain and the colonel, after making a careful reconnaissance, as they called it, of Fleet Street, found that by taking up a station at the window of a tavern, which was nearly opposite to the barber shop, they should be able to take such effectual notice of whoever went in and came out, that they would be sure to see the boy some time during the course of the day. This plan of operations would no doubt have been greatly successful, and Tobias would have fallen into their hands had he not, alas for him, poor fellow, already been treated by Sweeny Todd, as we have described, by being incarcerated in that fearful madhouse on Peckham Rye, which was kept by so unscrupulous a personage as Fogg. And we cannot but consider that it was most unfortunate for the happiness of all those persons in whose fate we take so deep an interest, and in whom we hope, as regards the reader, we have likewise awakened a feeling of great sympathy. If Tobias had not been so infatuated as to make the search he did of the barber's house, but had waited even for 24 hours before doing so, in that case, not only would he have escaped the dreadful doom which had awaited him, but Joanna Oakley would have been saved from much danger which afterwards befell her. But we must not anticipate, and the fearful adventures which it was her doom to pass through, before she met with the reward of her great virtue and her noble perseverance, will speak for themselves, trumpet-tongued indeed. It was at a very early hour in the morning that the two friends took up their station at the public house so nearly opposite to Sweeny Todd's in Fleet Street, and then, having made an arrangement with the landlord of the house that they were to have undisturbed possession of the room for as long as they liked, they both sat at the window and kept an eye upon Todd's house. It was during the period of time there spent that Colonel Geoffrey first made the captain acquainted with the fact of his great affection for Joanna, and that in her he thought he had at last fixed his wandering fancy, and found really the only being with whom he thought he could, in this world, taste the sweets of domestic life, and know no regret. "She is all," he said, "in beauty that the warmest imagination can possibly picture, and along with these personal charms, which certainly are most peerless, I have seen enough of her to feel convinced that she has a mind of the purest order that ever belonged to any human being in the world. With such sentiments and feelings toward her, the wonder would be," said the captain, "if you did not love her as you now avow you do. I could not be insensible to her attractions, but understand me, my dear friend, I do not, on account of my own suddenly conceived partiality for this young and beautiful creature, intend to commit the injustice of not trying might and main, and with heart and hand, to discover if, as she supposes it be true, that Thornhill and Mark and Jestry be one and the same person. And when I tell you that I love her with a depth and a sincerity of affection that makes her happiness of greater importance to me than my own, you know, I think enough of me to feel convinced that I am speaking only on what I really feel." "I can," said the captain, "and I do give you credit for the greatest possible amount of sincerity, and I feel sufficiently interested myself in the future fate of this fair young creature to wish that she may be convinced her lover is no more, and may so much better herself, as I am quite certain she would, by becoming your wife. For all we can hear of this in Jestry seems to prove that he is not the most stable-minded of individuals the world ever produced, and perhaps not exactly the sort of man to make such a girl as Joanna Oakley happy. However, of course, she may think to the contrary, and he may in all sincerity think likewise." "I thank you for the kind feelings toward me, my friend, which has dictated that speech, but—" "Hush," said the captain suddenly. "Hush! Look at the barber." "The barber? Sweeny Todd?" Yes, there he is. Do you not see him? There he is, and he looks as if he had come off a long journey. What can he have been about, I wonder? He's draggled in mud." Yes, there was Sweeny Todd, opening his shop from the outside with a key that, after a vast amount of fumbling, he took from his pocket. And, as the captain said, he did indeed look as if he had come off a long journey, for he was draggled with mud, and his appearance altogether was such as to convince anyone that he must have been out in most of the heavy rain which had fallen during the early part of the morning upon London and its suburbs. And this was just the fact, for after staying with the madhouse keeper in the hope that the bad weather which had set in would be alleviated, he had been compelled to give up all chance of such a thing, and as no conveyance of any description was to be had, he enjoyed the pleasure, if it could be called such, of walking home up to his knees in the mud of that dirty neighbourhood. It was, however, some satisfaction to him to feel that he had got rid of Tobias, who, from what he had done regarding the examination of the house, had become extremely troublesome indeed, and perhaps the most serious enemy that Sweeny Todd had ever had. "Ha!" he said, as he came within sight of his shop in Fleet Street. "Ha! Master Tobias is safe enough. He will give me no more trouble. That is quite clear. What a wonderfully convenient thing it is to have such a friend as Fogg, who, for a consideration, will do so much towards ridding one of any uncomfortable encumbrance. It is possible enough that the boy might have compassed my destruction. I wish I dared now chance, with the means I now have from the sale of the string of pearls, joined to my other resources, to leave the business, and so not be obliged to run the risk and have the trouble of another boy. Yes, Sweeny Todd would have been glad now to shut up his shop in Fleet Street at once and forever, but he dreaded that when John Mundle found that his customer did not come back to him to redeem the pearls, that he, John Mundle, would proceed to sell them, and that then their beauty and great worth would excite much attention, and someone might come forward who knew more about their early history than he did. "I must keep quiet," he thought. "I must keep quiet. For although I think I was pretty well disguised, it is not at all likely that anyone, no, not even the acute John Mundle himself, would recognize in Sweeny Todd the poor barber of Fleet Street, the nobleman who came from the Queen to borrow £8,000 upon a string of pearls. Yet there is a remote possibility of danger, and should there be a disturbance about the precious stones, it is better that I should remain in obscurity until that disturbance is completely over." This was no doubt admirable policy on the part of Todd, who, although he found himself a rich man, had not, as many people do when they make that most gratifying and interesting discovery, forgotten all the prudence and tact that had made him one of the most envied class of personages. He was some few minutes before he could get the key to turn in the lock of his street door, but at length he effected that object and disappeared from before the eyes of the colonel and his friend into his own house, and the door was instantly again closed upon him. "Well," said Colonel Geoffrey, "what do you think of that?" "I don't know what to think, further than that your friend Todd has been out of town, as the state of his boots abundantly testifies." "They do indeed, and he has the appearance of having been a considerable distance, for the mud that is upon his boots is not London mud." "Certainly not. It is quite of a different character altogether. But see, he is coming out again." Sweeny Todd strode out of his house bareheaded now, and proceeded to take down the shutters of his shop, which, there being but 3, he accomplished in a few seconds of time, and walked in again with them in his hand, along with the iron bar which had secured them, and which he had released from the inside. This was all the ceremony that took place at the opening of Sweeny Todd's shop, and the only surprise our friends, who were at the public-house window, had upon the subject was, that, having a boy, he, Todd, should condescend to make himself so useful as to open his own shop. And nothing could be seen of the lad, although the hour, surely, for his attendance must have arrived, and Todd, equally surely, was not the sort of man to be so indulgent to a boy, whom he employed to make himself generally useful, as to allow him to come when all the dirty work of the early morning was over. But yet such to all appearances would seem to be the case, for presently Todd appeared with a broom in his hand, sweeping out his shop with a rapidity and a vengeance which seemed to say that he did not perform that operation with the very best grace in the world. "Where can the boy be?" said the captain. "Do you know, little reason as I may really appear to have for such a supposition, I cannot help in my own mind connecting Todd's having been out of town somehow with the fact of that boy's non-appearance this morning. Indeed, the coincidence is curious, for such was my own thought, likewise upon the occasion, and the more I do think of it, the more I feel convinced that such must be the case, and that our watch will be a fruitless one completely. Is it likely, for possible enough it is, that the villain has found out that we have been asking some questions of the boy, and has thought proper to take his life? Do not let us go too far, said the captain, in mere conjecture. Recollect that as yet, let us suspect what we may, we know nothing, and that the mere fact of our not being able to trace Thornhill beyond the shop of this man will not be sufficient to found an action upon. I know all that, and I feel how very cautious we must be, and yet, to my mind, the whole of the circumstances have been day by day assuming a most hideous air of probability, and I look upon Todd as a murderer already. Shall we continue our watch? I scarcely see its utility. Perchance we may see some proceedings which may interest us, but I have a powerful impression that we certainly shall not see the boy we want. But, at all events, the barber, you perceive, has a customer already. As they looked across the way, they saw a well-dressed-looking man, who, from a certain air and manner which he had, could be detected not to be a Londoner. He rather resembled some substantial yeoman, who had come to town to pay or to receive money, and as he came near to Sweeny Todd's shop, he might have been observed to stroke his chin, as debating in his mind the necessity or otherwise of a shave. The debate, if it were taking place in his mind, ended by the eye's having it, for he walked into Todd's shop, being most unquestionably the first customer which he had had that morning. Situated as the colonel and his friend were, they could not see into Todd's shop, even if the door had been opened, but they saw that after the customer had been in for a few moments, it was closed, so that, had they been close to it, all the interior of the shaving establishment would have been concealed. They felt no great degree of interest in this man, who was a commonplace personage enough, who had entered Sweeny Todd's shop. But when an unreasonable time had elapsed, and he did not come out, they did begin to feel a little uneasy. And when another man went in and was only about 5 minutes before he emerged, shaved, and yet the first man did not come, they knew not what to make of it, and looked at each other for some few moments in silence. At length the colonel spoke, and he did so in a tone of excitement, saying, "My friend, have we waited here for nothing now? What can have become of the man whom we saw go into the barber's shop, but who I suppose we feel ourselves to be in a condition to take our oaths never came out?" "I could take my oath, and what conclusion can we come to?" "None, but that he met his death there, and that, let his fate be what it may, it is the same which poor Thornhill has suffered. I can endure this no longer. Do you stay here, and let me go alone?" "Not for the world. You would rush into an unknown danger. You cannot know what may be the powers of mischief that man possesses. You shall not go alone, Colonel, you shall not indeed. But something must be done." "Agreed. And yet that something surely need not be of the desperate character you meditate." Desperate emergencies require desperate remedies. Yes, as a general principle, I will agree with you there too, Colonel. And yet I think that in this case everything is to be lost by precipitation, and nothing is to be gained. We have to do with one who to all appearance is keen and subtle, and if anything is to be accomplished contrary to his wishes, it is not to be done by that open career which, for its own sake, under ordinary circumstances, both you and I would gladly embrace. Well, well, said the Colonel, I do not and will not say but what you are right. I know I am. I am certain I am. And now hear me. I think we have gone quite far enough unaided in this transaction, and that it is time we drew some others into the plot. I do not understand what you mean. I will soon explain. I mean that if in the pursuit of this enterprise, which grows each moment to my mind more serious, anything should happen to you and me, it is absolutely frightful to think that there would then be an end of it. True, true. And for poor Joanna and her friend Arabella, what could they do? Nothing, but expose themselves to great danger. Come, come now, Colonel, I am glad to see that we understand each other better about this business. You have heard, of course, of Sir Richard Blunt? Sir Richard Blunt? Blunt? Oh, you mean the magistrate. I do. And what I propose is that we have a private and confidential interview with him about the matter, that we make him possessed of all the circumstances, and take his advice what to do. The result of placing the affair in such hands will, at all events, be that if, in anything we may attempt, we may be by force or fraud overpowered, we shall not fall wholly unavenged. Reason backs your proposition. I knew it would, when you came to reflect. Oh, Colonel Geoffrey, you are too much a creature of impulse. Well, said the Colonel half-jestingly, I must say that I do not think the accusation comes well from you, for I have certainly seen you do some rather impulsive things, I think. We won't dispute about that. But since you think with me upon the matter, you will have no objection to accompany me at once to Sir Richard Blunt's? None in the least. On the contrary, if anything is to be done at all, for heaven's sakes, let it be done quickly. I am quite convinced that some fearful tragedy is in progress, and that, if we are not most prompt in our measures, we shall be too late to counteract its dire influence upon the fortunes of those in whom we have become deeply interested. Agreed, agreed. Come this way, and let us now, for a brief space, at all events, leave Mr. Todd and his shop to take care of each other, while we take an effectual means of circumventing him. Why do you linger? I do linger. Some mysterious influence seems to chain me to the spot. Some mysterious fiddlestick. Why, you are getting superstitious, Colonel. No, no. Well, I suppose I must come with you. Lead the way, and believe me that it requires all my reason to induce me to give up a hope of making some important discovery by going to Sweeny Todd's shop. Yes, you might make an important discovery, and only suppose now that the discovery you did make was that he murdered some of his customers. If he does so, you may depend that such a man takes good care to do the deed effectually, and you might make the discovery just a little too late. You understand that?" "I do. Come along, for I positively declare that if we see anybody else go into the barber's, I shall not be able to resist rushing forward at once and giving an alarm." It was certainly a good thing that the Colonel's friend was not quite so enthusiastic as he was, or from what we happen actually to know of Sweeny Todd, and from what we suspect, the greatest amount of danger might have befallen Geoffrey, and instead of being in a position to help others in unraveling the mysteries connected with Sweeny Todd's establishment, he might himself have been past all help, and most absolutely one of the mysteries. But such was not to be. Chapter 27. Tobias makes an attempt to escape from the madhouse. We cannot find it in our hearts to force upon the mind of the reader the terrible conditions of poor Tobias. No one, certainly, of all the dramatis personae of our tale is suffering so much as he. And consequently, we feel it to be a sort of duty to come to a consideration of his thoughts and feelings as he lay in that dismal cell in the madhouse at Peckham Rye. Certainly Tobias Ragg was as sane as any ordinary Christian need wish to be, when the scoundrel Sweeny Todd put him into the coach to take him to Mr. Fogg's establishment. But if by any ingenious process the human intellect can be toppled from its throne, certainly that process must consist in putting a sane person into a lunatic asylum. To the imagination of a boy, too, and that boy one of vivid imagination, as was poor Tobias, a madhouse must be invested with a world of terrors. That enlarged experience which enables persons of more advanced age to shake off much of the unreal, which seemed so strangely to take up its abode in the mind of the young Tobias, had not reached him. And no wonder, therefore, that to him his present situation was one of acute and horrible misery and suffering. He lay for a long time in the gloomy dungeon-like cell into which he had been thrust, in a kind of stupor, which might or might not be the actual precursor of insanity, although, certainly, the chances were all in favor of its being so. For many hours he neither moved hand nor foot, and as it was a part of the policy of Mr. Fogg to leave well alone, as he said, he never interfered by any intrusive offers of refreshment with the quiet or the repose of his patients. Tobias, therefore, if he had chosen to remain as still as an Indian fakir, might have died in one position, without any remonstrances from anyone. It would be quite a matter of impossibility to describe the strange visionary thoughts and scenes that passed through the minds of Tobias during this period. It seemed as if his intellect was engulfed in the charmed waters of some whirlpool, and that all the different scenes and actions, which, under ordinary circumstances, would have been clear and distinct, were mingled together in inextricable confusion. And in the midst of all this, at length, he began to be conscious of one particular impression or feeling, and that was that someone was singing in a low, soft voice very near to him. This feeling, strange as it was in such a place, momentarily increased in volume, until at length it began in its intensity to absorb almost every other, and he gradually awakened from the sort of stupor that had come over him. Yes, someone was singing. It was a female voice. He was sure of that, and as his mind became more occupied with that one subject of thought, and his perceptive faculties became properly exercised, his intellect altogether assumed a healthier tone. He could not distinguish the words that were sung, but the voice itself was very sweet and musical, and as Tobias listened, he felt as if the fever of his blood was abating, and that healthier thoughts were taking the place of those disordered fancies that had held sway within the chambers of his brain. "What sweet sounds!" he said. "Oh, I do hope that singing will go on. I feel happier to hear it. I do so hope it will continue. What sweet music! Oh, mother, mother, if you could but see me now!" He pressed his hands over his eyes, but he could not stop the gush of tears that came from them, and which would trickle through his fingers. Tobias did not wish to weep, but those tears, after all the horrors of the night, did him a world of good, and he felt wonderfully better after they had been shed. Moreover, the voice kept singing without intermission. "Who can it be?" thought Tobias, "that don't tire with so much of it?" Still the singer continued, but now and then Tobias felt certain that a very wild note or two was mingled with the ordinary melody, and that bred a suspicion in his mind which gave him a shudder to think of, namely, that the singer was mad. "It must be so," said he. "No one in their senses could or would continue to sing for so long a period of time such strange snatches of song. Alas, alas, it is someone who is really mad and confined for life in this dreadful place. For life, do I say? Am not I too confined for life here? Oh, help! Help! Help!" Tobias called out in so loud a tone that the singer of the sweet strains that had for a time lulled him to composure heard him, and the strains which had before been redolent of the softest and sweetest melody suddenly changed to the most terrific shrieks that can be imagined. In vain did Tobias place his hands over his ears to shut out the horrible sounds. They would not be shut out, but ran, as it were, into every crevice of his brain, nearly driving him distracted by their vehemence. But hoarser tones soon came upon his ears, and he heard the loud, rough voice of a man say, "What? Do you want the whip so early this morning? The whip, do you understand that?" These words were followed by the lashing of what must have been a heavy carter's whip, and then the shrieks died away in deep groans, every one of which went to the heart of poor Tobias. "I can never live amid all these horrors," he said. "Oh, why don't you kill me at once? It would be much better and much more merciful. I can never live long here. Help! Help! Help!" When he shouted this word, help, it was certainly not with the most distant idea of getting any help, but it was a word that came at once uppermost to his tongue, and so he called it out with all his might, that he should attract the attention of someone, for the solitude and the almost total darkness of the place he was in was beginning to fill him with a new dismay. There was a faint light in the cell, which made him know the difference between day and night. But where that faint light came from he could not tell, for he could see no grating or opening whatever. But yet that was in consequence of his eyes not being fully accustomed to the obscurity of the place. Otherwise he would have seen that close up to the roof there was a narrow aperture, certainly not larger than anyone could have passed a hand through, although of some 4 or 5 feet in length, and from a passage beyond that there came the dim borrowed light, which made darkness visible in Tobias's cell. With a kind of desperation, heedless of what might be the result, Tobias continued to call aloud for help, and after about a quarter of an hour he heard the sound of a heavy footstep. Someone was coming. Yes, surely someone was coming, and he was not to be left to starve to death. Oh, how intently he now listened to every sound, indicative of the near approach of whoever it was who was coming to his prison house. Now he heard the lock move, and a heavy bar of iron was let down with a clanging sound. "Help! Help!" he cried again. "Help! Help!" For he feared that whoever it was, they might even yet go away again, after making so much progress to get at him. The cell door was flung open, and the first intimation that poor Tobias got of the fact of his cries having been heard consisted in a lash with a whip, which, if it had struck him as fully as it was intended to do, would have done him serious injury. "So, do you want it already?" said the same voice he had heard before. "Oh, no! Mercy, mercy, said Tobias. Oh, that's it now, is it? I tell you what it is. If we have any disturbance here, this is the persuader to silence that we always use. What do you think of that for an argument, eh? As he spoke, the man gave the whip a loud smack in the air, and confirmed the truth of the argument by inducing poor Tobias to absolute silence. Indeed, the boy trembled so that he could not speak. Well now, my man, added the fellow, I think we understand each other. What do you want? Oh, let me go, said Tobias. Let me go. I will tell nothing. Say to Mr. Todd that I will do what he pleases, and tell nothing. Only let me go out of this dreadful place. Have mercy upon me. I'm not at all mad. Indeed I am not. The man closed the door as he whistled a lively tune. Chapter 28. The Madhouse Yard and Tobias's New Friend. This sudden retreat of the man was unexpected by Tobias, who at least thought it was the practice to feed people, even if they were confined to such a place. But the unceremonious departure of the keeper, without so much as mentioning anything about breakfast, began to make Tobias think that the plan by which he was to be got rid of was starvation. And yet that was impossible, for how easy it was to kill him if they felt so disposed. Oh, no, no, he repeated to himself. Surely they will not starve me to death. As he uttered these words, he heard the plaintive singing commence again, and he could not help thinking that it sounded like some requiem for the dead, and that it was a sort of signal that his hours were numbered. Despair again began to take possession of him, and despite the savage threats of the keeper, he would again have loudly called for help had he not become conscious that there were footsteps close at hand. By dint of listening most intently, he heard a number of doors opened and shut, and sometimes when one was opened there was a shriek and the lashing of the whips, which very soon succeeded in drowning all other noises. It occurred to Tobias, and correctly too, for such was the fact, that the inmates of that most horrible abode were living like so many wild beasts in cages fed. Then he thought how strange it was that even for any amount of money human beings could be got to do the work of such an establishment. And by the time Tobias had made this reflection to himself, his own door was once more opened upon its rusty hinges. There was the flash of a light, and then a man came in with a water-can in his hand, to which there was a long spout, and this he placed to the mouth of Tobias, who, fearing that if he did not drink, then he might be a long time without, swallowed some not over-savoury ditch-water, as it seemed to him, which was thus brought to him. A coarse, brown-looking, hard loaf was then thrown at his feet, and the party was about to leave his cell, but he could not forbear speaking, and in a voice of the most supplicating earnestness he said, "Oh, do not keep me here. Let me go, and I will say nothing of Todd. I will go to sea at once, if you will let me out of this place. Indeed I will, but I shall really go mad here." "Good that, Watson, ain't it?" said Mr. Fogg, who happened to be one of the party. "Very good, sir. Lor bless you, the cunning of 'em is beyond anything in the world, sir. You'd be surprised at what they say to me sometimes." "But I'm not mad. Indeed I'm not mad," cried Tobias. "Oh," said Fogg, "it's a bad case, I'm afraid. The strongest proof of insanity, in my opinion, Watson, is the constant reiteration of the statement that he is not mad on the part of a lunatic. Don't you think it is so, Mr. Watson?" "Oh, of course, sir, of course." "Ah, I thought you would be of that opinion, but I suppose, as this is a mere lad, we may do without chaiding him up. And besides, you know that today is inspection day, when we get an old fool of a superannuated physician to make us a visit." "Yes, sir," said Watson with a grin, "and a report that all is well conducted." "Exactly. Who shall we have this time, do you think? I always give a 10-guinea fee. Why, sir, there's old Dr. Popplejoy. He's 84 years old, they say, and sand blind. He'll take it as a great compliment, he will, and no doubt we can humbug him easily. I dare say we may. I'll see to it, and we will have him at 12 o'clock, Watson. You will take care to have everything ready, of course, you know. Make all the usual preparations. Tobias was astonished that before him they chose thus to speak so freely, but despairing as he was, he little knew how completely he was in the power of Mr. Fogg, and how utterly he was shut out from all human sympathy. Tobias said nothing, but he could not help thinking that, however old and stupid the physician whom they mentioned might be, surely there was a hope that he would be able to discover Tobias's perfect sanity. But the wily Mr. Fogg knew perfectly well what he was about, and when he retired to his own room, he wrote the following note to Dr. Popplejoy, who was a retired physician, who had purchased a country house in the neighbourhood. The note will speak for itself, being as fine a specimen of hypocrisy as we can ever expect to lay before our readers. The Asylum, Peckham. Sir, probably you may recognize my name as that of the keeper of a lunatic asylum in this neighbourhood. Consistent with a due regard for the safety of that most unhappy class of the community submitted to my care, I am most anxious, with the blessing of divine providence, to ameliorate as far as possible by kindness that most shocking of all calamities, insanity. Once a year it is my custom to call in some experienced, able, and enlightened physician to see my patients. I enclose a fee. A physician who has nothing to do with the establishment and therefore cannot be biased. If you, sir, would do me the favour at about 12 o'clock today to make a short visit of inspection, I shall esteem it a great honour as well as a great favour. Believe me to be, sir, with the most profound respect, your most obedient and humble servant. To Dr. Popplejoy, etc., O.D. Fogg. This note, as might be expected, brought the old purblind, superannuated Dr. Popplejoy to the asylum, and Mr. Fogg received him in due form, and with great gravity, saying, almost with tears in his eyes, "My dear sir, the whole aim of my existence now is to endeavour to soften the rigours of the necessary confinement of the insane, and I wish this inspection of my establishment to be made by you in order that I may thus, for a time, stand clear with the world. With my own conscience I am, of course, always clear. And if your report be satisfactory about the treatment of the unhappy persons I have here, not the slightest breath of slander can touch me." "Oh, yes, yes," said the old garrulous physician. Aye, very good. Oh, yes. I have a slight cough." "A very slight one, sir. Will you, first of all, take a look at one of the sleeping chambers of the insane?" The doctor agreed, and Mr. Fogg led him into a very comfortable sleeping room, which the old gentleman declared was very satisfactory indeed, and when they returned to the apartment into which they had already been, Mr. Fogg said, "Well then, sir, all we have to do is to bring in the patients, one by one, to you as fast as we can, so as not to occupy more of your valuable time than necessary, and any questions you ask will, no doubt, be answered, and I, being by, can give you the heads of any case that may excite your especial notice." Exactly. Quite correct. The old man was placed in a chair of state, reposing on some very comfortable cushions, and, take him altogether, he was so pleased with the 10 guineas and the flattery of Mr. Fogg, for nobody had given him a fee for the last 15 years, that he was quite ready to be the foolish tool of the madhouse keeper in almost any way that he chose to dictate to him. We need not pursue the examination of the various unfortunates who were brought before old Dr. Popplejoy. It will suffice for us if we carry the reader through the examination of Tobias, who is our principal care, without, at the same time, detracting from the genial sympathy we must feel for all who at that time were subject to the tender mercies of Mr. Fogg. At about 12:30, the door of Tobias's cell was opened by Mr. Watson, who, walking in, laid hold of the boy by the collar and said, "Hark you, my lad, you are going before a physician, and the less you say, the better. I speak to you for your own sake. You can do yourself no good, but you can do yourself a great deal of harm. You know we keep a cart whip here. Come along." Tobias said not a word in answer to this piece of altogether gratuitous advice, but he made up his mind that, if the physician was not absolutely deaf, he should hear him. Before, however, the unhappy boy was taken into the room where old Dr. Popplejoy was waiting, he was washed and brushed down generally, so that he presented a much more respectable appearance than he would have done had he been ushered in his soiled state, as he was taken from the dirty madhouse cell. Surely, thought Tobias, the extent of cool impudence can go no further than this. But I will speak to the physician if my life should be sacrificed for so doing. Yes, of that I am determined. In another minute he was in the room, face to face with Mr. Fogg and Dr. Popplejoy. What? Coughed the old doctor. A boy, Mr. Fogg, a mere boy. Dear me, my cough is a little troublesome. I think today. Yes, sir, said Fogg, with a deep sigh, and making a pretence to dash a tear from his eye. Here you have a mere boy. I am always affected when I look upon him, doctor. We were boys ourselves once, you know, and to think that the divine spark of intelligence has gone out in one so young is enough to make any feeling heart throb with agony. This lad, though, sir, is only a monomaniac. He has a fancy that someone named Sweeny Todd is a murderer, and that he has discovered his bad practices. On all other subjects he is sane enough, but upon that, and upon his presumed freedom from mental derangement, he is furious. It is false, sir, it is false, said Tobias, stepping up. Oh, sir, if you are not one of the creatures of this horrible place, I beg that you will hear me, and let justice be done. Oh, yes, of course, Sir, I am not mad. I am placed here because I have become dangerous to the safety of criminal persons. Oh, indeed. Oh, yes. I am a poor lad, sir, but I hate wickedness, and because I found out that Sweeny Todd was a murderer, I am placed here. You hear him, sir, said Fogg, just as I said. Oh, yes, sir. Who is Sweeny Todd, Mr. Fogg? Oh, sir, there is no such person in the world. Ah, I thought as much. A sad case. A very sad case indeed. Be calm, my little lad, and Mr. Fogg will do all that can be done for you, I'm sure. Oh, how can you be so foolish, sir, cried Tobias, as to be deceived by that man who is making a mere instrument of you to cover his own villainy? What I say to you is true. I'm not mad. "I think, Dr. Popplejoy," said Fogg with a smile, "it would take rather a cleverer fellow than I am to make a fool of you. But you perceive, sir, that in a little while the boy would get quite furious, that he would. Shall I take him away?" "Yes, yes, poor fellow." "Hear me! Oh, hear me!" shrieked Tobias. "Sir, on your deathbed you may repent this day's work. I'm not mad. Sweeny Todd is a murderer. He is a barber in Fleet Street. I'm not mad." "It's melancholy, sir, is it not?" said Fogg, as he again made an effort to wipe a tear from his eyes. "It's very melancholy." "Oh, very, very." "Watson, take poor Tobias Ragg, but take him very gently, and stay with him a little in his nice, comfortable room, and try to soothe him. Speak to him of his mother, Watson, and get him round if you can. Alas, poor child, my heart quite bleeds to see him. I am not fit exactly for this life, doctor. I ought to be made of sterner stuff. Indeed I ought." "Well," said Mr. Watson, as he saluted poor Tobias with a kick outside the door, "what a deal of good you've done." The boy's patience was exhausted. He had borne all that he could bear, and this last insult maddened him. He turned with the quickness of thought and sprang at Mr. Watson's throat. So sudden was the attack, and so completely unprepared for it was that gentleman, that down he fell in the passage, with such a blow of his head against the stone floor that he was nearly insensible. And before anybody could get to his assistance, Tobias had so pommeled and clawed his face that there was scarcely a feature discernible, and one of his eyes seemed to be in fearful jeopardy. The noise of this assault soon brought Mr. Fogg to the spot, as well as old Dr. Popplejoy, and the former tore Tobias from his victim, whom he seemed intent upon murdering. And that is where we are going to leave it for today. We're getting through it, though. We've only got a couple chapters left. As always, if you like what I'm doing here on my channel, please like, subscribe, hit the bell, share me with your friends, get me out there. But otherwise, I'll be seeing you guys later. Bye!